sell me this pen guy. Even just that question is so polarizing. If you authentically build and nurture real relationships with people, it makes everything else you want to achieve in business easier to achieve.
How difficult was it to build your first $1 million business?
It's actually surprisingly easy. And the mindset I had about people who were fit, like, oh, that's the I don't want to be one of those. Everybody should play video games, absolutely. Everybody should have something in their life that they fail at repeatedly. People, in general, are conditioned.
How difficult was it to build your first $1 million business?
It's actually surprisingly easy. When you don't know what you don't know, you just take action, right? The second $1 million business was much harder to build. Which just seems crazy, but my first business had much larger average transaction value, and it was much easier to get to $1 million in revenue. My second business had a much lower price point, so we had far more customers, but it was harder to generate the revenue we really needed to build a sustainable enterprise.
That sounds crazy. The second one was harder. A lot of people can't even think about what it's like to build $1 million business. What do they have to overcome mentally to build two?
First, forget about the number. I don't think that's nearly as important as the problem you're solving for other people. Because that's what a business is. When you can solve a problem for someone else, that provides meaningful value for them, right? Like, what did the Joker say in The Dark Knight? If you're good at something, you should get paid for it. And that's really what you do in a business. You solve someone's problem, and in return, you get paid for that. My tire's flat. I don't want to change it. I hire a tire shop, right? We build a business around that.
Do you think that people are solving the wrong problems? And that's why they're poor?
I think that for a business to really be sustainable, it has to have a significant problem it's solving. And if that problem has been solved by dozens of other brands, how do you compete with that? How do you stand out? How are you solving it in a new, different, more special way? You look at the companies that really, truly thrive no matter what the economy is doing, and they're all really focused on some need that people have.
Take me back then. Take me back, because there was a point when you didn't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
What did that feel like?
It felt like I had no choice. And, let's put some context around this, because saying I didn't have anything, right? I have so many gifts that I'm grateful for every day. I've got the energy, I've got the determination, I have enormous amounts of tenacity. I will stick with something and stick with it and stick with it until I find a way to make it work. I think a lot of people don't have that. So, when I think back to what it was like to have nothing, really, it's not that I had nothing, it's that I hadn't yet achieved the financial security that I really desired. But the building blocks to create that security were there. What was missing was the knowledge and the certainty. That was probably the biggest thing I lacked for the longest amount of time, was that certainty that I could actually make it work.
The certainty that you could make it work, would you just say it's like confidence in yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
What do you think, is that a main thing that people lack now? Is that something that you felt then? Because I want to hear your story. I want to go through essentially the step-by-step of from job to job to realizing you could achieve this. And you're saying innately there was something there.
So I think if I strip it all down to just first principles and its most basic parts, I was fortunate to have a few lessons early in life that caused me to develop a belief structure that if I stuck with it, I would succeed at it eventually, right? And we've talked about video games being great for this, right? So many kids play video games, their parents think they're wasting their time. And yet what you're doing is you're applying new ways to solve a problem repeatedly until such a point as you succeed. That's a great lesson for anybody to learn in life.
So you're saying everybody should play video games?
Everybody should play video games. Absolutely. Everybody should have something in their life that they fail at repeatedly, that's hard for them to actually succeed at, that they've got to take an iterative approach to. Slight adjustment, slight adjustment, slight adjustment. Oh my God, success. Well, how did I do that? Can I do it again? That's something that's in the framework of nearly every video game. And when you get it figured, I mean, think of any game you've played through in your life, right? There was a time when you're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get through this level? I don't know. You die and you die and you die and you die. And then if you, after you've played the game through, you know exactly what to do, right? So all those challenges you talk about in business, I mean, what a great metaphor that is, right? Because none of us really have to invent how to succeed in business, Grant. We don't. There's so many models of people who've succeeded. We just need to observe what it is that they've done, have a radical truth conversation with ourselves about what we're actually willing and capable to do, and then choose a plan that we're actually capable of executing. Right? So if I want abs this summer on the beach, go me. But I hate sit-ups and I hate eating right, there's no amount of pleasure that's gonna I have to find a way to fall in love with the process of eating right and exercising to take care of myself to get that result. So that's what I'm talking about in these steps of growing a business. You gotta piece it together the right way within who you actually are as a person, right? I'm not 7 feet tall. I'm never going to be a center in the NBA. It doesn't give me, there's no amount of hoping and mindset and belief and, visualization that's going to ever allow me to achieve that goal, right? So I'm much wiser to pick a path I can actually succeed in.
Does everybody have that? Does everybody have that thing that they'd probably win at?
I think that most people have talents that they enjoy. And, from a young age, maybe there's something you get recognized for, right? Do you remember that in your childhood? Mm-hmm. There were things where somebody you respect was like, hey, Grant, you actually have a talent for this. Mm-hmm. Because we have to be taught what we're good at. It just seems normal to us. We need that outside validation to help us really see the things we can be most effective at. And then we need the courage to invest in that. So I think we really do need to feed our strengths. It makes sense to round in our weaknesses, round out our skill set, but we should really double down, invest on where we're strong.
All right, so let's talk about that for you. When you started your career and when you were working in your 20s, you weren't really good at sales.
No. Yeah, I didn't want to be. I felt like sales was a disgusting profession. I think a lot of people relate to this. In my family growing up, salespeople got no respect, right? They were manipulative, they were fast talking, they were out for themselves. They were people who got paid to lie at scale. And I never wanted to be that kind of person. I mean, why would I? Who would? Who would want to be that person?
What changed?
So many things. So many things changed, Grant. First is that life led me to a place where I felt an obligation to have a higher income than was capable doing the things I was enjoying doing, right? Which in my 20s after college, I wanted to be a writer. And to fund that, I was working as a bartender and a waiter, right? So, you can go in, have a good shift, earn enough money to play golf and pretend to be a writer and go to the beach and pretend to be a writer. And in my early 20s, I didn't have anything to say yet. I just didn't have the experience. But I met my wife in college and, I knew I wanted to have a long-term successful relationship. I knew I wanted to be a parent. And so when we got married at 25, it was because my wife was pregnant with our first child. And that was the context of, oh God, I have to earn more money than I can being a bartender and a waiter. I'm going to have to take this dream of being a writer and set it on the shelf, right? I'll get back to that at some point in life because right now I'm responsible for this new life. And I have to be, I have to. There is no option other than making absolutely sure I can care for that baby and provide for my family.
What did it feel like to give up on your dreams?
I didn't give up. I just postponed. I've never quit on a dream, and I never would. I just recognized that there's seasons in life, and in that particular season, it was more important for me to stay focused on what would allow me to achieve that dream over time than to neglect and reject the responsibility I had. I mean, God, I'm so grateful for my wife and my kids. I could never imagine, I could just never imagine doing something other than showing up for them to the best of my ability. So I had to earn more money, and the people in my life were like, just get a sales job. Just do that. You'll earn more money. You'll be fine. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be that. Yuck. Yuck.
So what did you do?
I took a sales job. Yeah, I took a sales job. And I'm really grateful for the people I was surrounded with at that point in my career. And I'm really grateful for the time when that took place, because I had had sales jobs, growing up. I was slinging greeting cards door to door when I was in first grade. I did the right to the back of Boys Life magazine thing. I did telemarketing in high school for a little while. And I mean, neither of those experiences taught me really anything about sales.
Did you speak to people in telemarketing?
That's a good question. I still remember the pitch, right? It was something like, hello, is this Grant? Grant, I have great news. Do you remember that card you filled out? Yeah, you won. You won a vacation. You're going on vacation, Grant. How cool is that? And you'd be like, oh my God, yay, I'm going on vacation. And then, I'd rattle off all the benefits that you got, like what was going on there. And then just to secure that, I need a payment from you today for, I don't remember what the dollar amount was, probably like $195 or something. And then you'd get the vacation certificate, and you had to go sit in a timeshare presentation. And yeah, I mean, I did that job for like 3 weeks, and I hated every moment of it. And it was, for me, confirmation that sales was scum. Like, it was just a life I didn't want. And yet, when I found myself in that life, I hadn't resolved those issues. I still had all kinds of role rejection.
So you took a sales job despite not liking it, but needing it. Were you good at sales when you first really tried?
No. Yeah, no. I nearly got fired from my job.
You got fired from your job?
Nearly. I nearly got fired. My boss called me to her office and she said, we like you, but turn in your headset, Dan. You can't work here anymore. And I thought about Zoe at home, our tiny little baby. And I sold my boss on letting me stay there.
How did you convince your boss to not fire you?
I remember the visceral reaction. There are a few experiences in life that are just indelible. And for me, the pressure of that moment of having to go home and tell my wife I lost our only source of income when we have a 1-month-old baby, like, that was an unacceptable outcome, right? And I remember that moment so clearly. It was like just as simple as a switch being turned. Like, click, the switch in my brain turned over, and I was like, I have to sell. I have to do what they're telling me. I don't have an option here. It was just click. It's that moment where I decided, okay, I'm going to embrace exactly what they're teaching, and I'm going to have to do that. And while I don't remember exactly what I said, I do remember thinking that there was no way I was leaving her office without, the ability to keep the job. And so she gave me a very small window of time. And I remember going back to my desk with a whole renewed mindset. And I've thought about that conversation a lot over the years, because that was a moment where I embraced the thing I did not want to. And I set aside who I know myself to be in favor of security for my family.
So what did it feel like to have your boss try to fire you?
I remember sitting across from her desk and thinking of our daughter Zoe and thinking of my wife Kenley and just knowing for sure that I had to make a change. I could not go home and tell my wife I lost our only source of income. That was not an acceptable outcome. So it was like a switch in my brain just clicked over, and I somehow managed to sell her on letting me keep my job for at least a little bit longer. And that's when I went back to my desk and I really embraced everything they had taught me, which was, lots of sales training from the 80s and 90s that just kind of were stuck in this organization. It was really manipulative. It was lots of fear of lost closing, lots of scarcity, tons of manipulative stuff, lots of scripts that I just really chafed with. But I had to learn it. And so I did. I went back to my desk, and from desk door at about 6 weeks of employment. If this were charted out, you could see I was failing, and then all of a sudden I wasn't. And I started building it up steadily, and I got really good at running their playbooks and just running the script and working it like a performer. And it felt like a mix of good and bad. All of a sudden I had more financial security than I had previously experienced. That felt great, but it also felt really bad to, do what I was doing every day.
How did it feel? Because you had success selling, but you were doing it the way that
Yeah.
everyone else was doing it. At what point did that come to a crux of you're like, I have to make a transition away from the way that other people do it to do my own thing the way I want to do it?
Have you ever been good at something you didn't like doing?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about some of the mindsets I've experienced during different phases of my life. I used to be 50 pounds heavier than I am right now. And the mindset I had about people who were fit at that point in time was like, oh, that's the bro culture, the gym guys, I don't want to be one of those, those people. And when I was working at this job where I had learned to sell, I was becoming one of those people in my mind that I didn't want to be, right? And I remember so many of them so clearly where they were so enjoyable to spend time with, like great storytellers, just fantastic people to spend time with, really great. And then there were some who were just like, super bro culture, like let's kill them, let's, crush it, let's, hustle. Like, and just none of that really felt like it was authentic to who I actually was. And it didn't really feel like it was sustainable for me. So even though I was earning more and I was getting promoted, I knew for sure there was a point where things were going to have to change. I would not be capable of really building the kind of life I wanted while pretending to be someone I fundamentally wasn't. And of course, years later, I understand that that's the story of nearly every salesperson. Most people don't choose a sales career. They find themselves in a life circumstance where they end up in a sales career. And then they deal with, oh my God, I have to learn these scripts. I really have to say that thing? That seems so manipulative. People struggle with that, and they don't have to. They just don't, because sales is really helping people get what they already want more efficiently. That's what sales is. So the best salespeople are not product, feature, benefit. They're not, selling the sizzle instead of the steak. They're listening. They're understanding. They're connecting what it is deep down that someone really wants, and then they're positioning themselves, their product, their service in a way to help that person get the thing that they really want. That's a magical skill to be able to deploy.
So is it possible to be a non-scummy salesman?
Absolutely it is. I am one, and I have been one for a long time, and I've really enjoyed teaching people to be that way. There's so many truisms that just scratch the surface. Like if you've been to any sales training class, you've heard God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you speak, right? Everybody's heard that. But that's just like a little cliche throwaway line, right? Every sales trainer always teaches people to do a better job listening. But so what if you're hearing and you're not understanding? The magic happens when you're understanding. And that's why I teach something I call the connection question. You imagine yourself in a sales scenario and you ask a question to someone. Based on how they answer, you get a sense whether that really matters to them. The connection question is any question you ask that really lights someone up, where they're like, yes, I want to talk about that. So, if I'm meeting with someone to help them find their next home, and I ask them, hey, I'd love to know what's most important to you about your next home. And that person starts immediately talking about, well, I'd love to have a great neighborhood where, our kids can meet other kids and be friends and we can meet other people and, a place where we could welcome friends to the house. That answer is telling me that person really wants a sense of community. That's the thing that they're trying to provide. That's the thing they're trying to fill in their purchase of a home. It's not just a dwelling. It's not just a place to live. It's a place to experience that life with the people they care about.
Walk me through the next step for you, which was going from this thing you don't like, the scripts you don't like, the way of selling you don't like. When did you say, okay, I have to do my own thing?
As soon as I got good enough to know that I wasn't going to get fired, I started working on my own thing, right? When you're winning the sales contests and you're at the top of the leaderboard, when you're crushing your quota, you've got latitude to experiment with some things. You don't have that latitude when you're not performing. And that makes sense, right? As an employee of that organization, which is a wonderful organization, I'm so glad I worked there. I had an obligation to provide what they were purchasing from me, right? They were the customer. They were buying my time and my energy, and it was my job to give them what they were buying. So once I had done that enough, I figured, okay, I need to take this farther. And I did so much studying, Grant, so much reading, so many courses. I really spent a decade learning how to do this in a way that felt congruent with who I am. And looking at my bookshelf, it's full of all these books that helped me get where I am today.
Read a lot of books, did a lot of learning, and then you launched your own thing.
I did. Yeah.
What did that feel like?
It felt incredibly scary, right? Anytime you do something new, there could be a little bit of anxiety. At that time as a dad, we had 2 young children now, and I had a secure job. I was earning a very respectable income. I'm 28 years old now. I'm father of 2. We've purchased our first home. Like, life had been progressing really well. And to say I want to exit that security, to attempt to do something on my own was incredibly scary. It took a lot of grit to do that. And I'm, proud and ashamed of the fact that I'm where I am today. The ashamed part, I want to clarify, because that first company failed in 90 days.
Your first company failed in 90 days?
My first company failed in 90 days. And I was completely unprepared for the reality of being a business owner. I was not nearly capitalized like I should be. I just didn't know what I didn't know about being a business owner.
Why didn't you quit after 90 days? If you fail in 90 days, I feel like I would want to go just straight back to my job and be like, please.
Yeah. Well, um, I didn't go straight back to my job. I was fortunate to work with entrepreneurs every day. And one of those entrepreneurs had attempted to hire me. And I reached out to him and explained what I had been doing and that, my goal was to be a business owner. And we worked out a plan to where I could become an equity partner in his company if I achieved certain sales objectives. And so we started down that path, and he already had an existing thriving business. He had the revenues necessary to nurture this new thing to see if it could actually become something. And again, I'm really grateful for that experience too, because every success and every failure has tons of lessons. And the big lesson for me in that partnership was that we were at different stages of our career, and we really wanted different outcomes. And so while it was successful in the interim, it wasn't going to be the long-term success that I was really searching for, because we weren't striving towards the same goal. Right? So that partnership ended, and I found myself once again starting a new business. And that business thrived very quickly, and it thrived based on the relationships I had built in these previous businesses. So, and we were 90 days old at that point. So I'd gone from failing in 90 days to in 90 days having significant revenues. It happened really quickly. And we grew to over $3 million a year in revenue fairly quickly. Ultimately from, two guys in a truck to, 100 plus employees, lots of resources and assets and technology needs. And, the path I'm on now as a prop tech entrepreneur was really born then because we needed software that didn't exist to run our company. So we hired a software engineer to build it. And ultimately that became a product, which became a company, which allowed us to have an exit. And it's just like one thing has led to another now successively for almost 30 years of being self-employed.
I think there's a lot of people that would dream of being self-employed. That's like their end goal. What would you say to someone that is currently at their job? Maybe they're sitting at their desk right now and they're saying, man, I hate this. I hate my job. What should I do?
Yeah. Find something to love about your job, right? I don't love doing dishes, but I love having a clean kitchen. You've got to find something that you can love about what you're doing, because the hardest part of being self-employed is not whatever's happening in the market. It's what's happening here, right? And the sooner you take control of your mental environment, the better equipped you're going to be to face whatever's happening in a market.
What's the number one skill that someone should have if they're looking to start a business?
Oh, the number one skill someone should have. First thing that occurs to me is optimism.
Optimism's a skill?
I think optimism's a skill. Yeah, I think it is.
Is it a choice?
I think optimism is absolutely a choice, right? I think presented with the same set of circumstances, the way we respond to it is what ultimately makes the difference. And I'm going to err on the side of being optimistic, always. Because when I've chosen not to be optimistic, I find myself not taking action. And that's what really matters if you're going to be a business owner. It's not what you're thinking about doing. It's what you're actually doing that makes a difference. And if you don't maintain that positive mental attitude, that optimistic mindset, you're constantly fighting yourself. And you want to really train your whole body, mind, and spirit to lean into achieving what's possible regardless of what the economic environment's doing.
Why do people want to work with optimistic people?
I want to work with optimistic people because we find ways to win when others just find things to complain about. I think that's why my employees choose to work with me. I think that's why our business partners choose to work with me. Life is hard. Nobody gets out of here without a few scars, right? We're going to encounter things that are absurdly painful sometimes. And I would rather face the absurd pain of a life well lived with people who are going to embrace it positively. How do we make the best of is a leading question.
So you're saying optimism is more important than being good at sales?
I'm saying that optimism is a first domino that leads to being good at everything else, right? Because think of just the transition we've talked about. Sales sucks. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a manipulator. I had all these negative associations with it, right? So the pivot point is, well, what if sales doesn't have to be that way, right? What if there's a way I can show up as a professional salesperson that makes a positive impact on the people I engage with every day, right? That's a much more empowering way to face your day of appointments than, oh, I have to be someone I can't even stand, right? How can I be more present? How can I be a better listener? How can I care more? How can I love more, right? How can I love my job? How can I love myself? How can I love my customer?
Are those the questions that you'd ask, ask yourself this? Because it almost sounds like it's like a list. It's like those are the questions I would ask myself if I'm feeling like I hate my job.
It has been so long since I've hated my job. It's hard for me to even get my mind around that. I'm so incredibly fortunate to get to wake up and choose what I do every day. There are aspects of what has to get done every day that I don't enjoy. I don't love bookkeeping. I don't love registrations and regulations and insurance, and like all that stuff is just the minutia of business that has to happen. It's not the sexy, exciting, creative stuff that jazzes up most people. So many people who make that transition from being an employee to being self-employed, they fall in love with that creative portion, and yet they haven't learned to pick up their socks every day, right? There's if you don't have the discipline to face the rigors of business day in and day out, it's monumentally, exponentially harder than it needs to be.
What's one strategy that you found to choose optimism in situations where it's so much easier to just complain about?
Yeah. So I'm going to get a little woo-woo here. Okay, just a little woo-woo, right? So, if you've ever taken a yoga class, if you've ever learned to meditate, there's a portion where you become the observer, right? You're not judging, you're just observing. And so when I find myself reacting to something, I say, oh, ooh, what is that? I need to just observe that, right? I just let it be. I don't make a judgment around it first. And that, conscious choice to respond in that way gives me a freedom to act purposefully instead of reactively. So one thing I learned from my first job at Burger King, right? A 14-year-old kid working at Burger King, you don't get ready for the lunch rush during lunch, right? You got to be proactive. You got to be prepared for the moment when it shows up. Yeah. And so much of business is being proactive with just our own mindset, because if we're not ready to face that moment, it's going to pass us by.
Do you think that people are generally proactive, or are they lazy?
I think people in general are conditioned to seek comfort. Like we'll avoid pain, we'll seek pleasure when possible. So the sort of hack here is to figure out a way to associate pleasure with the things you find painful, right? So I don't love that sink of dirty dishes. Who does, right? But I do love having a clean kitchen, right? I do love coming into my bedroom at the end of a long day and knowing that the bed is made. It just feels better, right? It's like a small gift you give yourself. In fact, I had a conversation with my daughter Zoe just yesterday on this topic. And we were talking about these little things you learn along the way that you don't realize what an important lesson it actually was. And I think of it as loving your future self, right? So over here near my coffee maker, I have a Brita water pitcher. And, I brew my coffee and I fill up the pitcher. And next time I want to brew, I've got this fresh, clean filtered water ready to go, right? So when I fill that up, I think about, this is just like saving for retirement. It's just like, investing in that course. It's just like reading that book. I am loving my future self every time I fill up that pitcher. I'm making it easier for me at some point in the future.
What's different about the way you sell now?
So much. I do have a structure for every sales call, right? And that structure is around service. So the right way to begin a sales call is before the sales call starts. You start by researching who this person is that you're going to be meeting with, right? What is it about them that you can establish some common ground and build rapport over? That's important, right? You're looking for something relevant that you can build a relationship around initially. You're trying to get a sense of who this person is, right? And then as the sales call begins, you're finding a way to greet them sincerely and enthusiastically because of something you've learned about them, right? Grant, I'm so looking forward to having this meeting today. I was reading on your LinkedIn and yes, I did the Google stock. I saw that you're a musician and you can see behind me, look at all the guitars. I mean, well, I figured we're probably going to get along. I've been looking forward to having that chat, right? That is sincere. It's actually true.
Yeah.
It's a structure. It's not a script, right? So the playbook is find common ground, find a way to use it to build rapport, right? That helps what comes next easier, right? So research first, build rapport second. Then you need to position yourself and the appointment that you're having, right? So, hey, before we dig in, I just want to take a moment and make sure we're on the same page about today. I've been fortunate in life. I've built multiple companies. I'm at a stage where I'm in my labor of love phase. So I'm going to show up for you today to the best of my ability. I'd like to have a frank conversation with you about where you are versus where you'd like to go. And then I promise if I can help you get there, I will. And if for some reason I can't, I'll tell you that too. Is that okay? Can we have that chat? And they're like, oh my God, you have a plan. You're not just feature benefiting me, right? So then we're going to have that conversation and I'm going to ask them about the things I really need to know to understand whether or not I can help them. And once I'm certain that I can, then it's time to transition to presenting the product, the service, the solution that could solve their problem. But it's coming after you know where they are, where they'd like to be, and that for certain you can help them.
I don't associate the term sales with genuine.
That's a shame. I think that's something that needs to change, quite frankly, because just consider where we are in time. As someone my age, we've seen the birth of the internet, the birth of social media, the birth of AI. Sales bots are out there. And if we don't insist on making the future of sales human, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we can program a manipulation machine. I don't want to be part of that future. I think sales professionals have the mandate, they have the access, they have the skills. They need the intention of really showing up for their fellow human being in a way that's conducive to that better future.
Do you think? Well, so I'm gonna list off some names that are famous salespeople. I want you to tell me what you think about them.
Okay.
So one of the names that always comes up, like, what do you think about Jordan Belfort?
Loved The Wolf of Wall Street as a movie.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've met Jordan. Didn't enjoy it.
Why?
Yeah, didn't enjoy it because he is representative of that me first, win at all costs, manipulative sales genre. And, super entertaining movie, super entertaining speaker. And yet I do not want to embrace that. I don't want to become that sell me this pen guy. Even just that question is so polarizing. Like, what are you proving to him or anyone else when you've got an answer about how to sell that pen? It's just a gimmick.
What about Ty Lopez?
Don't know Ty Lopez. Yeah, aware of him. Know he's got a great social media following. I haven't plugged in enough to comment.
Okay. I'm curious because there's a lot of people that are known for being great salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
Almost none of them are good salespeople.
Hmm.
And I'm curious because part of my perception of like the sales lane is that it's disingenuous. It is get sale at all costs. Look at how successful I am at getting sale at all costs. Or at least seeming genuine. It's almost like car salesman on steroids. And I'm curious because everything you're vocalizing is this genuine want to help. But sometimes helping doesn't mean making money.
Yeah, that's okay though. Just because someone doesn't become your customer doesn't mean they can't become a source of referrals. Right? So every single person I have the privilege to spend time with, I want to show up in a way that's powerful and authentic to who I am. And sincerely, if they don't become my customer, I'm fine with that, right? What I'm not fine with is just running through the same rote, feature, benefit, scarcity, fear of loss, sign them up at all costs kind of thing. Not my jam.
How can I learn to do that differently? Because everything I'm seeing, everything I'm reading, everyone's yelling at me and telling me I need AI agents. I need to be less human. I need to automate everything. And there's a secret script that's going to get me the guaranteed result.
Yeah.
When you're saying, I just need to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a point in life where, we're all 100% convinced Santa Claus is real. Like, we know this for certain. And yet there's a point in life where you just got to go, okay, there's a difference between wishing it was true and what's actually true. Maybe that's a bad example. I don't know. But from my perspective, I think there's a shit ton of get rich quick, use this script, apply this formula stuff that just isn't going to possibly work. Where relationships always work. If you authentically build and nurture real relationships with people, it makes everything else you want to achieve in business easier to achieve. Period. There's no exception to that. None.
Why don't we build real relationships?
It's the momentary need outweighing the long-term win. And, back to my days in this first sales job, right? This, oh my God, I'm about to get fired. I had to close the sale, right? And some people are fine just closing the sale. I mean, they're doing exactly what they were hired to do, right? Why wouldn't they feel good about that? They're being praised by their employer. That makes sense. Something in me said, no, there's got to be a better way than that. There's got to be a way to show up as an authentic human who cares about other people and do great at sales. Because, there's no substitute for work ethic. There's no substitute for grit, for tenacity. There's a huge trade-off when you apply those skills that are hard to build, right? Hard to commit to, hard to consistently achieve over time. There's a huge payoff when you couple that with sincerity and authenticity. That's the magic formula, right? It's brute force plus sincerity.
What do you want people to get out of your book?
I want them to...
Actually, can you hand it to me?
Sure.
All right, so, yeah. What do you want people to get out of this book?
I want people to first understand that sales doesn't have to be manipulative. That's the first lesson. Second lesson is that success is not months away. It's not miles away. It's not buy this course away, right? It's as close as your next sales conversation where you ask the right questions and you actually understand what the meaning of their answers are, right? Because we all fundamentally want things. And, human psychology is not so complex that most of what we want can't be neatly filed into the 5 sales personas I outline in this book, right? And so if you understand what someone wants, you can help them get it. That doesn't feel like sales. It feels wonderful. It feels like you're really helping people just get what they want.
I love it. I think something I'd love for you to kind of highlight is like, if I read this book and I spend time reading this book, what am I going to get out of it? Because I'm a lot of us, like, we want to make sure that if we're reading books, this is really valuable. There, you mentioned like these 5 sales personas. Is there some tactical knowledge that I'm going to pull from this?
Absolutely, there is. Yeah. So a couple things about this book. It's a story. It's written as a parable. You follow a struggling sales professional from the brink of disaster, being nearly ready to quit, to a place where she's actually thriving at a very high level. So as she's learning these things through the narrative, the reader's learning them as well. And every step of the way, you're learning things that you can immediately apply.
And by the end of it, what's the goal?
Yeah.
Just the real connection. We're talking about, we mentioned a lot of things like learning how to be genuine, learning how to help.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate goal of reading this book is to be able to instantly identify your prospect's dominant buying psychology, right? You will know exactly what it is that they really want, and then you'll be able to help them get that, right? That's a magical thing, because when you know what someone wants, it's not sales anymore. It just doesn't even feel like the same thing. If you think of sales as being scripts, manipulation, fear of loss, scarcity, tie downs, closes, that's not what's in this book. What this book promises is to set you free from all the negative connotations that you have about a career in sales and put you firmly on the path to showing up as an authentic human who happens to be great at sales.
Who should read this book?
Every sales professional should read this book.
So you're saying if I'm a business owner, if I'm in real
Absolutely.
estate, if I'm just
Absolutely.
car salesman?
Doesn't matter what industry. The protagonist in the book is in real estate. She could be in any industry. It applies absolutely everywhere. If you're in a sales business at all, in any capacity, you should read this book.
I think the last thing I was going to want to ask you is this, how many years did it take for you to develop this framework?
So the framework has been developed over decades. The core science that made this book possible started in the late 1960s. So the values and lifestyle survey that Abraham Maslow did of the U.S. population is the core fundamental beginning of this book. Without that science, this book wouldn't be possible. So yeah, there's decades of knowledge that are applied into a narrative that's easily accessible to any reader.
So if I'm just getting started in my career?
Totally fine.
Yeah.
In fact, you should read this first before you start your sales career.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thanks. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you. Check out this book. Get it right now. Linked below.